So before we move on to other portfolios, cyberbullying.
Yeah. Well, look, this is probably the downside of this exciting new internet world that we're living in, is that, you know, back when you and I were young, everyone said a few things in the playground and was a bit mean to some kid or mean. And look, that's part of life. It's not nice. It's never been nice, but it's been something we're familiar with. But what happens, of course, when it gets online is that the posts are often anonymous, so people feel much more free to attack and say vicious, nasty things. But for even more than that, it can go global, you know, go viral, as they call it, within seconds. You know, and within a couple of minutes, something can be seen by literally millions of people, and it's almost impossible to completely remove. And it's not just saying something a bit harsh or that I might not like the sound of. It's really nasty, aggressive stuff. You know, continual, repeated calls for people to kill themselves and saying nasty, horrible things to them. It's issues like what we call revenge porn, which is where, you know, a couple have perhaps taken intimate photos of each other when they were together in happier times, and then as part of breaking up, one partner decides to get their own back by posting those photos all over the internet. And at the moment, there's really no quick, easy way to get that stuff taken down.
You're looking at that?
Well, we've just passed the new law, actually. So we've just passed the Harmful Digital Communications Act, and that does a couple of things. It sets up an agency whose job it is to both mediate resolutions in the first instance, to educate the public, and to work with the district court to get takedown orders for harmful material. And also at the very nasty end of the scale, you know, we're talking about people like the roast busters who not only did some pretty horrible things, but then posted it all online. There's actually criminal offences. So for those at the really nasty end of town who've gone out and encouraged people to kill themselves by just vicious, relentless, aggressive bullying, it enables some action to be taken. So I think it's about reflecting that communications in a digital world are different. The harm factor is potentially a lot higher, and this is setting up a framework to make very clear what's expected, and to create an agency to help, as I say, work through those issues in a quick, responsive way. It's not, you know, the internet doesn't wait for you to go off to court and wait 6 months for a court date. No. You need pretty quick redress, and that's what this is about.
And we look at marsh insurance, for example,
Yeah.
that went round the world in a matter of minutes.
Absolutely. And it's not just young people. Often people think this is about schoolyard bullying. Actually, you look at someone like Charlotte Dawson, you know, who was driven to take her own life after just relentless, horrific, ongoing harassment. And, you know, some people have been saying, oh, gosh, it's going to be a limit on free speech. Well, free speech has always had its limits on it. You know, you can't go into a crowded theatre and yell fire, and you know, there are some things that society doesn't accept. But it's not about stopping anyone saying what they think in a normal way, but it is about saying bullying, harassment, threats, and revealing really intimate images are not okay.
So is it sort of like, are you modifying the defamation laws? Or
it's not through defamation. Defamation still exists, but some of this is true. I mean, if there are nasty, intimate photos that have been taken in one situation, it wouldn't come under defamation because those things did occur, but it was never intended that they would be put all over Facebook and sent around the world. Or the Marsh insurance video, for example, it's not defamation, it's true. But nonetheless, it shouldn't be published and sent around the world potentially.
See, I wasn't on Facebook because I didn't get involved, and then somebody with a warped sense of humour put me on and said a whole lot of things which were defamatory, and you know, I probably could have at that point.
You could have. Well, you could have probably gone and taken a defamation suit, but if you've ever talked to lawyers, I mean, I used to be a lawyer, Rob, and I did a bit of defamation law, and look, it's a good remedy for certain cases, but the reality is it has to be a very, very high level of harm before, you know, your lawyer's saying you're up for $100,000 for a defamation suit. You know, you're not going to do it for a lot of things, and a lot of really nasty damage is done under that radar. So it's getting that balance right. People will have views, and I'm not going to I don't like everything that's said about me online. It's pretty nasty, but in my job you learn to cope with that. But that's quite different.
You shouldn't have to, though.
Well, you shouldn't, but that's quite different from ongoing, perpetual abuse, harassment, bullying, intimidation. You know, we're not talking about something I just don't like because I say, oh, that Amy Adams, you know, she's a silly old cow. That's fine, but that's not going to breach this act. But if someone was putting you know, nasty, insidious
well, you can modify
threats,
photographs and things as well.
you can do all sorts of things. And the damage online is just, that can be caused is so much different. So this is just reflecting, look, the digital world is incredibly exciting, the opportunities are limitless, but there is another side we have to think about, and how cyberbullying, just like cybersecurity, are part of just adapting to this new world.
And that comes into privacy law, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, it does. And it is, again, this interface between what happens online and how we continue to keep New Zealand and New Zealanders safe. And as part of what we have to do as the government, we have to think about how we protect New Zealanders. And, you know, there was a really nasty case, I'm sure that your viewers have heard of the father in Dunedin who murdered his 2 children, chap Livingston, and the coroner's report came out recently, and she made the point that one of the big failings as to why the agencies didn't join the dots sooner about the risks involved in this particular case was because they were all scared to share the information they had because they were worried about breaching the privacy laws. You know, when Philip Smith did a runner to Rio because he decided that would be nicer than our prisons, you know, there was concerns about whether the corrections department, who had the information about who could leave, was able to share that with customs so that they couldn't get through the border. Now, to me, there's something gone seriously wrong if we're more worried about breaching Philip Smith's privacy in that situation than we are about upholding the laws of New Zealand. So I think the whole privacy settings and how they work and whether they are stopping some good protection and safety of New Zealanders needs to be looked at, because if you take it to the nth degree, you know, we can't keep New Zealanders safe. And I think if I say to you or I say to anyone walking down the street, do you expect your government to be able to join the dots on someone like Edward Livingston or stop someone like Philip Smith, you know, leaving the country when he shouldn't? I think the obvious answer is, well, yes, of course we do. And yet somehow we've got into this catatonic state of we can't tell can't share that information with anyone because it'll, you know, be a privacy issue. So we just have to get that balance right.
And that flows into family violence. I mean, everything we've sort of been talking about flows from one to the other.
Yeah, and actually this is the amazing thing with my suite of portfolios. They link up in ways you wouldn't expect. But look, family violence is one that I'm really worried about. When I look at the crime stats, New Zealand is safer than it's been for 35 years, which is incredibly good. But the one area that really isn't dropping, in fact it's going up, is family violence. Now, it's going up, but we think, and we can never be sure, we think that's an increase in reporting, which is actually a good thing. But nonetheless, what it tells us is that we have one of the highest rates of intimate partner violence in the OECD. And, you know, that's not the New Zealand I like to think that I live in. I like to think that we live in, you know, we're not naive. We know there are problems here and there are families in real stress and dysfunction. But I can't, you know, accept that New Zealand should have the highest rate of family violence in the OECD. That's not what I want for the country. And I think it's not something the government can magic away by one program or, you know, a new law. I think it's something that all society has to think about. How do we do this better? And what we're doing isn't cutting through enough. Do you know, half of all the homicides in New Zealand are family violence. So if we could cut our murder rate in half if we got on top of family violence.
And it's not just city, is it?
No, it isn't. And that's one of the misapprehensions, I think. People like to think, oh, well, that happens somewhere else. Maybe it happens in, you know, South Auckland or somewhere that isn't us. It's not true. It happens every part of New Zealand. It happens in every economic band. It happens in every ethnic group. It happens at every age level. And sometimes, actually, there's more of a shame factor if you feel like you live in a, you know, wealthier, you know, more European community. You think, gosh, I can't possibly admit that this is happening. And you know, one of the scary things is that we know, on average, it's usually a woman, not always, but you know, a woman might suffer 21 instances of family violence before she'll ring the police. 21 instances before she'll even pick up the phone.
That's the average.
That's the average. And yet there's a notification to police every 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes, the police are being rung about a family violence incident. You know, it makes up more than 40% of all police time. So we want to think about what our police are doing and how they're keeping us safe. More than 40% of their time goes on dealing with family violence. So this is a massive issue in New Zealand. And I think all of us, from the government to the social sector, to communities, to neighbours, we all have to be thinking about how we can play our part in getting on top of it, because it's not the future I want for my children.
Well, no, certainly not. But it's a very hard one because, as you said, it's the shame factor.
Yeah, it is. It is the shame factor, and it's a situation where often, by the time it's developed to a level of severity, the confidence of the victim has been worn right down. They feel somehow that they deserve it, or in some communities it's normal, it's what they've grown up seeing, they don't see it as any different. So it really is an intergenerational thing to cut through. And it goes right from the sort of the earlier, lower level expressions of control and emotional abuse and shouting and the like, right through to murder, you know. So there's a full spectrum, and the ranges of assistance that are needed are different. If we can get the perpetrators into some anger management and stopping violence programs sooner, that helps. But equally, there are times we just need to get the abuser out of there, keep the woman safe, get the kids safe, allow her to strengthen her home. So I've just announced, for example, some funding to enable us to go in and put security around a woman's home so she can stay there. You know, bars on the or not bars, but you know, locks on the windows, outside security lights, deadbolts. Because if we can keep the woman and her children in the home, it's a far easier path for them. If leaving your abusive partner means you've got to pack up your kids and your life and your connections and your community and the kids' schools and go, it's a pretty big barrier to get over.
It is.
So we've got to look at a number of things, but you know, what we're doing isn't working. You know, there's some very, very hard-working, well-meaning people, but we have to do more.